So guys, welcome to 76 Mumbai MuleSoft meetup. And in today's session, we will going to discuss about CloudHub 2.0. In previous session, we have discussed about CloudHub 1.0, right? So here we will focus on CloudHub 2.0. Okay. So hope everybody attend that CloudHub 2.0 session, right? So most of the people I think attended it. Okay. So we will talk about CloudHub 2.0. Okay, so guys, this is the part two in the in the MuleSoft platform architecture. In session where we'll talk about CloudHub 1.0, and now we will going to talk about CloudHub 2.0. Okay, the safe harbor statement: both speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in the individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here. This presentation is strictly for learning purpose, and organizer presenter do not hold any responsibility. That same solution or same will be working for your requirement. The presentation is not meant for any promotional activity. It is just for learning purpose. Housekeeping: the recording of this meetup will be uploaded to event page within 24 hours. You can submit the question at any time, right? I will suggest everyone they can on their mic and just ask me the question, make it the session more interactive. Give us a feedback. So I request everyone to provide the feedback about the session. So at the end of the session, one session will be finished, you will be receiving the email where you can provide the feedback. Okay, I will just skip. So my question: anybody have work on CloudHub 2.0?
Just the deployment.
Okay. Okay, deployment is just anybody work on the CloudHub 2.0? No, right? So most of the customer currently using a CloudHub 2.0, right? So they are using, instead of CloudHub 1.0, they are using CloudHub 2.0. So basically, what's the main difference between CloudHub 1.0 and CloudHub 2.0? So in CloudHub 1.0, when we talk, right? So whenever we deploy the application, right, what it does, it create a new virtual machine in the AWS. Here the solution is bit different. Here it doesn't create any virtual machine. Instead of that, it create a container within the same runtime fabric, which might be running in some backend. We don't have to worry about to setting up the Kubernetes or anything or runtime fabric. So MuleSoft automatically spin up a container where it can deploy your MuleSoft application, basically, right? So it's a fully managed, a containerized service for deploying and the running MuleSoft application. Right, with CloudHub 2.0, developer can easily deploy and run the application in resilient and easily scalable environment. So in CloudHub 1.0, we call worker and the worker size. Here we call replica and the replica size. In the Kubernetes language, we call instance as a replica and computing resources as a replica size, basically, right? So these are the terminology we use in the CloudHub 2.0. In CloudHub 2.0, you can deploy the application within the private space or the shared space. Private space is similar to Anypoint virtual private cloud. If you want to run your application privately or within your own space, within your own IP ranges, then you can make use of the private space. Then container based application isolation. So here if you have seen in CloudHub 1.0, we have a VM based application isolation. Here it's a container based application isolation. So basically, if you're saying my replica is 1 and my replica size is 0.1 vCore, so it will spin up one replica, right, with a computing resources of 0.1 vCore. If you are saying I want my application to run on 2 replicas, so it will going to create a 2 replica, right? And 2 replica with the computing resources of 0.1 vCore each, right? Similar CloudHub 2.0 is also available in 12 regions globally, similar to CloudHub 1.0. Here, you can just deploy the application on multiple replicas or multiple instances to ensure the high availability and the fault tolerance. There's one main difference between CloudHub 1.0 and CloudHub 2.0. So in CloudHub 1.0, if you see the vCore size is 0.1, 0.2, and that directly then 1 vCore, then 2, 4, 8, and 16. Here you have like more granular vcore sizes available, 0.1, 0.2, like 0.5, 1.0, 1.52, 2.53, 4, 3.5, and 4 vcore, up to 4 vcores basically, right? So minimum 2 replica required. So like so this is like maximum vcore can be allocated to per replica is 4 vcore. If you want to deploy the application and if you want to enable the clustering, so right, so you at least you require two replicas. Why you require the clustering? So basically if your application is using object store and VM, basically VM queues, right, and if you want to share the object store and the VM queue across the multiple replica the same, right, so in that case we have to enable the option called clustering basically. So it will ensure that the object store and the VM queues are shared across the multiple replica or the application. If you don't do that, right, so there might be possibility, not possibility, there will be like it will each application will create its own object store and it will be not shared. So clustering is needed for that. It support for rolling down, rolling update and recreate while application deployment. So rolling update is nothing like application deploy with the zero downtime, where like it will ensure that the old application keep running, it will accept the request till the new instance of application is not successfully deployed. And in case of recreate, it will delete the application, right, it will require some kind of downtime and it will deploy the application basically, right? So that's what it can be easily and it can be dynamically scalable basically. So you can do the horizontal scaling by increasing the number of replica, you can do the vertical scaling by increasing the like replica sizes basically. It also like with like cloud 1.0 also support features like intelligent tiering, zero downtime update. CloudHub 2.0 like stores up to 200 MB of log data per application or per config, and like like per config I think, and it's up to 30 days, whichever limit is reached first. So like if like in 30 days it's not able to store the 200 MB data, but still if 30 days come it will delete the data. If it reached to 200 MB, so it will before 30 days it will delete the logs basically. So what are the benefits? It's a cloud native architecture, as I mentioned. Like the containers are the basically lightweight, right? So basically, and like whenever you deploy the application, it will be a bit faster. Basically, like whenever you're deploying the application in the on the Kubernetes, right? So it will be a bit faster as compared to Cloud of 1.0. Better scalability, support horizontal scaling and vertical scaling using replicas. So like we can increase the number of replica to achieve horizontal scaling, and to increase the replica size to achieve the vertical scaling. High availability, so if you are deploying the application in more than one replica, so it will ensure the high availability, right? Okay. So the next thing, built-in load balancing, it's like there's a no need of separate load balancer. Like in case of Cloud of 1.0, we create a VPC, and on the top of VPC, we create a dedicated load balancer. This particular architecture provide the Ingress controller, so that can be used like it's a part of your private space. You don't have to create any additional load balancer there, right? Improve resource utilization. So here like it's a like as I mentioned, it provide the option for allocating the granular vcode basically, right, and it better CPU sharing. So strong network isolation. So we like as I mentioned, we use the private space like to deploy our application within the private region basically. It also supports some kind of inbound and the outbound firewall rule, whereas like Cloud of 1.0 support inbound firewall rule. Here it have a inbound as well as outbound firewall rule. You can set up to 80 or more than 80 inbound firewall rule, I don't know the exact number, and 80 up to 80 outbound firewall rules basically. You can define like how your traffic can go out, how your traffic can come in your private space. Enhanced login and monitoring. So here like if you see in Cloud of 1.0 basically, we are not able to see the dedicated load balancer logs. For that we have to contact support team and all these things. But here you have option where you can download the load balancer logs also. Faster deployment, as I mentioned, containers are the lightweight, right? It provide like it will ensure that the application get deployed faster. Like in container, as you mentioned, like it can spin up very fast basically. Better security defaults, as I mentioned, it provide to configure inbound and outbound firewall rule. It support the feature like are like end-to-end SCDPS kind of thing, right? So those kind of things are already available, so it provide much better security basically. Any question, guys? Any question? Feel free to ask question. Yeah, yeah, Bino.
So Jitendra, I have one question. What is the exact difference between vCore and the replica?
No, like it's a terminology difference, right? So it's the
Okay,
same
so
thing
it's
basically.
just plain.
Like in the world of Kubernetes, we call this as a replica and replica size, right? In the world of virtual machines, we call it a worker and the worker size. It's the same kind of like like replica size and worker size is like nothing. It's a computing resources, whereas replica and worker is nothing number of instances basically. It's the same thing.
So both are creating a virtual space for the application to run, right?
Yeah, yeah, like in case of worker, like it create a virtual machine VMs basically, right, on AWS EC2 instance. It spin up EC2 instance basically, and where it deploy. Here like in CloudHub 2.0, like they already have a EKS or a runtime fabric in the backend, where it can spin up the container in that RTF instance basically, right? You don't have to worry about setting up RTF anything. You just have to like whenever you want to deploy the application, you can choose the right replica numbers and replica size, so it will automatically spin up container into the existing infrastructure or existing runtime fabric basically. Yeah.
And so you mentioned about clustering. So like if we need to create a cluster, so we should have a two replica, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like it doesn't make sense. Like if you have one replica, like it will
One.
not allow you to provide. It will not provide that option even to check that, right? So whenever you
Yeah.
deploy the application to replica, and whenever you want to share the data, like you want to share the object store or VM queues, right? You have to enable that option. Otherwise, what will we create, right? So the both replica will create its own object store if you are not enabling the clustering option, and there might be problem like in syncing data. Both object store may be out of sync. Like one object store contains some other data, and one object store can contain some data, right? So it will be out of sync basically. In case of if you enable the clustering, the object store and VM queues will be shared, and even the
Uh,
cache and everything will be shared.
I'm just sorry for one more question. Sorry. So parallelly, we need to set a load balancer, right? Or it is like
No,
automatically will
as I
set up.
mentioned, like we don't have to do set up the load balancer in CloudHub 2.0. It automatically provide the Ingress controller, right? So when you
Okay.
create a private space, right, it automatically provide the Ingress control, right, so that you can leverage. We don't have to create the additional load balancer here. It's a part of your private space.
Okay. But in Cloud One, we need to create a load balancer, right?
Yes, we have to create DLB, dedicated load balancer, and we have to define mapping rules and everything. Yeah,
Okay. Thanks, Ethan. Thank you.
yeah. Okay. So, like, let's start with shared space. Shared space is similar, like in the cloud of we have share, like any space like that where we are not running application in the private space. Basically, simple. Like it's not running application in our own isolated network, right? So, shared space is like it's a space where you can run the Mule application in a multi-tenant environment, basically, right? So, Cloud of 2.0 provide one shared space in each region to deploy your application. So basically, like you can like you have a 12 region, you can select like in which region you need to deploy the application. It will automatically deploy application in that particular shared space basically. When to use the shared space and when not to use the shared space. We don't have a requirement for vanity domain, like can continue to use like cloud.io. No custom certificates required, right? You don't have to require a custom certificate on mutual authentication. Your application deployed in the shared space don't want to. So maybe your application deployed in the shared space, and like your application doesn't have to access any resources like database services which is behind the firewall or in the corporate data center or in the Azure cloud or any other cloud basically, right? In that case, you can definitely go with shared space. You don't have a requirement of running the application isolation from the public cloud, right? If you want, like if you are okay to share your network, right? So not network, like if you are okay to share the space, and like if you don't have any requirement of private IP address and all those things, you can definitely go with the shared space. When not to use the shared space, you want to application run in a single tenant environment or in an isolated way mode. So when I'm saying when you want to run your application in your own net, in your own IP ranges, in your own space, right, then you can go with the private space. Private space is similar to Anypoint virtual private cloud. Okay. When you have a requirement of vanity domain, so basically if you want to host each and every API into a single domain, right, that is where you can use this particular we cannot use shared space. Need of custom certificates, need of mutual authentication, then we cannot use the shared space. need a private endpoint. So whenever you deploy the application in the shared space, it will only give a public endpoint, right? But in case of whenever you deploy the application in the like no in the private space, right, it will give you a private endpoint. So whenever you want to connect some resources which is behind the firewall, right, like databases or services or on, so in such cases you cannot go with a shared space. Shared space is similar to a vanilla space or vanilla or what I will say vanilla architecture provided by CloudHub 1.0. Similar, this is the CloudHub 2.0. Okay. So one of the thing I haven't explained you, like that Cloud Hub 1.0. So I have a tenant one. This is very important concept. Tenant two. So the tenant one, tenant two is nothing. They are the customer of MuleSoft, right? If tenant one deploy the application with name test hyphen API, and if you try to deploy the same application with same name in the tenant two, right, it will not work. Because what happens in case of MuleSoft or in case of CloudHub 1.0, your any application name must be unique across the tenant also, right? So you whenever you put the application name, right, it try to check that application name whether this name is available or not. You have noticed that, right? So that is kind of things happen basically. And even like the name, like you have developed you have deployed this application in tenant one in the dev environment, right? If you try to deploy this application within same tenant with same name in the production or UAT environment, it will not work. It will not work. You need to append something like that, prod, okay, and dev. And also I always do something like I append org name basically right at the front, so it can have a uniqueness. But in the case of CloudHub 2.0, this is not true. So here what you have the application name must be unique across the tenant, must be unique across the environment, right? So that is what you have to make sure, like your application name must be unique. So because whenever you put the application name, right, it try to check whether this particular name is available or not, right? This is the one of the concept in the CloudHub 1.0. I just forget to explain because it's very important, like when we go with the CloudHub 2.0, how application name will be there. So this is a simple architecture. So we have an Ingress load balancer with a public endpoint, right? This we can call this as a shared Ingress load balancer with a public endpoint. You have a three environment, right? And like and it can connect to the any services or any SaaS product which is available over the public internet. But it cannot. This particular architecture cannot connect any resources which is behind the firewall. The other limitation with this, like each application deployed which will give a separate URL, a separate domain basically. How I will tell you how it will going to happen. Okay. So now for example, I deploy my application with API test, right? So it will give the API test, right? Then it will give some 6-digit unique ID, right? And then like it also add region, I think US East one. Then it will also again add 6-digit unique ID hyphen 2 dot cloudhub.io, something like that. Now you are deploying a second application with name like so invoice test. So every time you are getting a new domain basically, right? So every time you are getting this particular URL as a new domain basically, right? This will be also changed, something like that. So in case of like shared space, you will get each application will have its own domain, right? So own domain basically, right? So you cannot go with you cannot host everything into the single domain basically in the shared space. So let's talk about the private space, right? So how we can overcome the limitations of the shared space, or how we can fulfill. There are some requirements which cannot be achieved using the shared space. The private space is nothing. It's like any point virtual private cloud, right? And private space is again it's a virtual private and isolated network or isolated space within your CloudHub 2.0 on your MuleSoft application. Okay, you can definitely create a multiple private space in the single or the multiple regions. So one of the mandatory requirement for creating the private space, you need to provide a CIDR range, which we have discussed how we can calculate the CIDR range, right? Again, it supports /24, which is minimum, and /16, which is maximum basically. When to use the private space? So whenever you want to connect any resources within behind your firewall via VPN or transit gateway, right? in that case you can definitely go with a private space. You have to go with a private space, like there is no other choice. If you want a private endpoint, like if you have a system API and a process API should not be accessible over the public endpoint, right? And you want to make sure like we have a private endpoint available, and they so like if they want to experience API or want to communicate with process API, they want to communicate via private endpoint, and process API want to communicate with system API over the private endpoint. In such case, you cannot go with a shared space. You need a private space. If you want custom certificate or domain certificate, if you want to configure like if you want to host everything into a single domain, you don't have a choice. You have to go with a private space only. And if you want have a, some kind of if you want to stop the traffic on certain ports or certain like on HTTP or like on TCP or IMAP or ICMP or all those kind of protocol, you can define the inbound firewall, and even you can define the outbound firewall. If you don't want to send traffic over the HTTP and you just want to send traffic over HTTPS only, you can define the outbound firewall. So there are various protocol support for like HTTP, TCP, ICMP. There are multiple protocol supported. So this is a typical of private space IP address. So now one question like, yeah, I can generally it is recommended to create one private space for non-prod, one private space for prod, but you can create a single private space and you can map all the environment to that particular private space. That is also possible. But recommendation always segregate your production and the non-production environment. That is the best way, right? Now this is my private space architecture. So like now it will give a public endpoint and the private endpoint both, right? And I have three environment, and this particular there are application want to connect some services available in AWS VPC, right? So I can use the create a transit gateway in AWS, and I can attach to the MuleSoft, and it will enable the communication between your Anypoint Platform runtime manager and or your private space and the AWS VPC. Then I also have a requirement where I have to connect to the VPN because I have a database behind my behind my firewall basically, or in the corporate data center, and it is a private. I cannot access that over the internet. So there is only one option. We can go with the IPN VPN IPsec tunneling basically, right? So we have option to create a virtual private network into the private sorry between the private space and the corporate data center where your database reside. Okay, any question?
Is this private space also free, or does it cost any extra
No,
license or money?
okay, I will know. Yeah, definitely. It we need to we need to buy it, right? You need to check your subscription have a private space or not. If your subscription have it, then you can create it. If your subscription don't have it, you need to contact a Salesforce team. Yeah, definitely it have like cost basically. Like it's not free.
Okay. But shared space would be free, right? Then
Shared space, like nothing is free, right? The shared space it's a default environment, right?
environment.
It's a default, like whenever you purchase a CloudHub 2.0 subscription, so it will be by default it will be coming Pakistan.
Okay.
Any question on this architecture first of all? No question? Good. So before I get into this, I will show you one of the private space, how it looks. Okay. So you can go to the runtime manager, you can get into the private space, and I will open one of the private space. So here if you see like okay, let me do one thing. First I create new private space. Here you can just say test mule ps. You have to give the private space name, right? Once I create it, then you have to create a private network. So where you can just select in which region I have to create this private space. Then you have to provide a CIDR block, like for example tet.1.0.0/22, like something like that. And if you have any reserved CIDs, you can provide that. I will just ignore this. I will not going to create. Okay. So once you just like once you provide all this and you just create it, like it will take at least like maybe like sometime it may take 30 minutes or sometime it 15 minutes. So let's wait so once like it takes some of time. So VPC creation is a bit faster, but here it may take some time basically for creating the private space, right? So just wait like just till 30 to 45 minutes for private space to get created. Okay, I'm not creating it right now. Okay, this is what I've created. Let me remove this. I don't want to create it. Okay, Okay, so I will show you one existing. So once I create a private space, it will give me region, it will give a CIDR block, which is the private IP range we have provided. It will give a public DNS. So this will be my public DNS. This I generally call as a record. So again, it will provide a record. Okay, then it will also provide me an internal endpoint. This is my internal endpoint. This is again a internal a record. Okay, so this is the nothing a private endpoint. Then it provides inbound static IP and outbound static IP. Why three IPs? Anybody have any idea on that? Anybody thought about that? Like why three inbound IP and why three outbound IP? In some cases, like in some region, it will provide two inbound IP and two outbound IP. Anyone, like any guess? Guys, guess. No, okay.
Is it for high availability?
Yeah, that is true. Okay, that is like almost correct. So this is for high availability. Each IP address represent one availability zone. Okay, so like one availability zone basically, right? If I copy this URL and if I go to command prompt and I can do ns lookup, okay, so it will be resolved to one of the IP address. So ns lookup is disabled on my server. 10.90. Okay. Okay, it's disabled on my laptop, that's why it's not working, which is fine. So here you have a tree and like outbound IP basically, right? So these are again representing three availability zone. Now one question, anybody knows like for example, like I have deployed one application in the CloudHub 1.0. Like this is very good question, right? This can be interview question, this can be platform architect question basically in the examination, right? So I deploy my one of the application in the CloudHub 1.0, right? CloudHub 1.0, right? And what happened now? So basically, as I mentioned, whenever I redeploy it or whenever application get restarted, IP get changed, right? But that particular application is connecting to some FTP location or SFTP location where we have like some kind of IP whitelisting or like IP whitelisting kind of thing basically, right? So like if IP is not whitelisted, it will not allow to connect to that particular SFTP or FTP location, right? So as I redeploy the application, every time I cannot go and change the IP. I cannot inform vendor to change to add this particular IP address. It, for example, in one day my application restart for 5 times. I cannot go and tell my I cannot tell the vendor or like SFTP provider to just whitelist this IP address every time. It is a time consuming process. What we do that for that in CloudHub 1.0, what we do?
Static IPs.
Yeah, we enable the static IP. So in that case, even we redeploy it, even it restart, it will have a same IP address. But we don't have a concept of static IP address here. Then what we will do? And like there's a one limitation also. How many static IP address you get it? So number of vCore into 2. So for example, I have a 2 vCores in my subscription. I will just get a 4 IP address. But if my 10 application need like no static IP, I have to purchase additional IP addresses, right? But in case of CloudHub 2.0, we don't have this static IP addresses basically. Then what IP addresses will going to whitelist? Okay, so I will give the answer. It's very simple. Here we don't have to allocate any static IP addresses, and we don't have to worry about the number of static IP addresses we have. We have this outbound static IPs, these 3 particular IP addresses, right? So whenever any application will communicate with the external entity or external services, they will going to use these 3 IP addresses. So you just have to give these 3 IP addresses. This will not going to change even, right? So you have to provide these 3 IP addresses to the whitelist, to the FTP provider to whitelist, or to any service whitelisting basically. Any service want whitelisting, you can just provide these 3 IP addresses. So whenever application will communicate, it will use one of the IP address. So depending on from which availability zone it is like communicating basically, right? So that is the concept of like, that is where they have removed the concept of static IP addresses, and they have come up with some this outbound static IPs basically, right? So now in this case, like you don't have to additionally go and go and allocate the static IP addresses to each and every application, right? So we can just go with these three, right? Is this clear?
There is one question. So, let's say there are 10 applications in this private space.
Hmm.
So, how will we know that the particular like how will they map three IPs will map to 10 applications?
Yeah, that is one. See, here we cannot restrict that. Okay, Arsit. Like if you want like my three application only or communicate, no, we cannot do that, right? We only have an option where we just once we whitelisted those three IP addresses, like anybody application want to connect, right? Any with any other services, they can do that basically, right? So you don't go with these three IP addresses basically. You are saying 10 application and one IP. No. So any all the 10 application will be using those three IP addresses to communicate with the external applications basically, Arsit.
Okay.
But you don't have an option. You can limit to some of the application, right? That option is not available. Is the answer your question, Arsit?
Okay. 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 Yeah.
Now domain and TLS. So now like I already created this particular thing. Now I don't want this URL. I want API dot uh, I will say mule.com, then API internal dot mule.com. So this is what a mapping I will do. This is nothing my C name. Okay, and this particular okay. So api.mule.com, this is nothing my C name, or we can call this as a vanity domain. Okay, so you have to do like this particular entry will go so you can do the C name and the A record mapping in public DNS registry, right? It can be GoDaddy or any other public DNS registry, and this particular will go to the private DNS registry within your org. Okay, so that's what you have to do. So this is very important. So request will come, it will route to this particular URL, CNAME request, and also other thing you have to make sure you have to add the certificates. For example, like here some example certificate is added, domain certificate, right? So you need to add domain certificates like key store and the trust store. Trust store is only required in case like if you want if you have some kind of mutual authentication, right? In mutual authentication you require private key and the public key both, right? So trust store will have a client certificate, and like private like the key store will have your private certificate basically, like that. So that is where this concept is very important. Then we have ingress in the file word rule, so where you can define what are the ingress rule you want, what are the egress you want, right? So if you want app level rules enabled, you can just enable that also, right? Here you have a environment, you need to map the environment with this. Give me a second. Okay, sorry. So basically like where I was, 1 minute. So here you can just say which this business group here you can select what are the business group you want, and what are the environment you want, to all environment or all sandbox environment, all the production environment that you can see. Then advanced, so here you can say how you have to redirect the traffic, https only accept http or drop http, like those kind of thing, right? So here redirect to https, it will accept the traffic, and redirect only on https only, accept http, it can accept http, drop http basically, so it will not going to accept any http traffic. So here you can just download the ingress load balancer logs basically, right? And like you here you can define the response timeout from your ingress load balancer. Right now it's 5 minutes basically, right? So those kind of things you can configure on your private space. Okay, yeah, just give me 1 minute. Okay, so let's me. Is this any question on this configuration? The important thing, like you have to then I will talk about the VPN also. So like here you have to configure domain certificate, key store. In case of you now you should ask me question, if we have a multiple client, they will have it the different public key, right, for the mutual authentication. How will we going to manage? So every time we have to add that certificate into key store, and we have to update that key store here. Sorry, trust store, not key store. We generally maintain a public certificate in the trust store. We have to upload that, right? So somehow, like, we have first 5 client where I uploaded all the 5 certificates added into my trust store. Like my 6th client is coming, he also want mutual authentication. We will going to add his public key into the trust store. We will just update that with 5 plus 1 6 certificates, like that. Okay. Okay, what is when you considering how CloudHub 2.0 migration consideration? So like CloudHub 2.0 provide the option of clustering basically, right? So where you can leverage the replica scale out to provide horizontal scaling and reliability. So clustering is a good option where you can share your object store, VM queues, and everything. So other, like when you are looking for some granular vCore options, you can go with we can migrate into CloudHub 2.0. Application insights for your application runtime managers are not supported in CloudHub 2.0. So if you see more control over traffic in CH1, in order to restrict the external access only to the external experience layer API in your customer own, it would require the DLB basically. It will require setting of two LB, one DLB for internal request and other for public internet. We have seen, right? We need a two DLB, right? Alternative to compromise the HA for internal traffic utilizing single DMA. They okay. So basically, like here you see, like we need to create a dedicated load balancer. We have to manage it for internal traffic. We have to create one dedicated load balancer for external traffic. We have to create another dedicated load balancer. But with CloudHub 2.0, like we don't have to worry about that. Whenever we deploy the application, it automatically provide a private endpoint, and it also provide a public endpoint. If you don't want to expose your application of public endpoint, just remove the public endpoint, then your application is only accessible over the private endpoint. CloudHub 2.0 only support version 4.3.0 and above, right? And here in CloudHub 2.0, you have to deploy the application on 8081. It doesn't want any other port. All the application has to be deployed on 8081, whether it's HTTP or whether it's HTTPS, right? Doesn't matter, right? So that's what you have to consider, right? So as I mentioned in CloudHub 1.0, we have a 8081 for HTTP dot port, 8082 for HTTPS dot port, 8091 for HTTP dot private dot port, 8092 for HTTPS dot private port, right? Here we have a single port for each an application. If you try to deploy application on 8082, and whenever you try to send a request to that, you will get a bad gateway, right? Bad gateway 502 error. What is CloudHub? So as I mentioned, architecture, it's a VM based architecture, whereas CloudHub 2.0 is the Kubernetes like container based architecture. So application runs on like application runtime, it's run on dedicated EC2 instance or virtual machine, whereas in CloudHub 2.0 it's a pod or container based, right? Resource allocation, fixed worker size 0.2, 0.1, 1, then 2, 4, 8, and 16. Here we have a flexible, more granular vCore sizes. Scaling, manual horizontal scaling at the worker. Like again, here also we have a feature of auto scaling, right? But again, here we have to just increase the replica size. Clustering, no true clustering supported, right? So here, but with the CloudHub 2.0, we have an option where we can enable the clustering, and which allow you to share the resources between the object store and the VM queues basically. Load balancer, it required dedicated load balancer. It already have a built-in Ingress controller which automatically provide a private and the public endpoint, so which allow you to easily control the traffic, what kind of traffic can be allowed to the application with the public or the private. Logging access, it's a limited for load balancer. We don't have any logs provided, but with CloudHub 2.0, if you see, we have an option to download the Ingress load balancer logs basically. So security control, it have an inbound firewall rule where we talk about 8091, port 92, 8081, and 8082. But here, like with this CloudHub 2.0, you have an option where you can set up lot of firewall rules up to 80 inbound and up to 80 outbound. I don't know whether it has been increased now, but when it was there, it was 80 inbound and 80 outbound. It supported older Mule 4 version, whereas CloudHub 2.0 support 4.3 plus and above basically, and it also Java 17 ready. Any question? Let me show you something. So here, if you edit the rule, right? So you can just like here is saying allow HTTPS from 0.0.0/0 traffic from any IP addresses, right? If I just want HTTPS, I can remove this, allow HTTPS, right? And I like from any source, or if you want just from your local network, right? From your private space or any custom IP address, you can do that, right? It supports TCP, HTTPS, many protocols basically, right? So let me cancel this. I don't want to change it. Then for egress also, like you can just right now it's saying TCP on 0 to 65535 port and allow HTTPS to anywhere. So going outside traffic basically. It also have many protocols like TCP and all this thing basically, TCP, UDP, and many other protocols. Like you can just set up the outbound rule. Whatever rules you are setting up, it is applicable to the application automatically. Now I will come to the application. Oh shit. Let me. Okay, let me go to Runtime Manager. Okay, so this is my, and now other thing, like once you have created and now you want to connect the resources which is behind the firewall or which is in the AWS VPC, right? So you can create a connection here. So you can select the VPN or transit gateway. So I will select the VPN, test API VPN. VPN is nothing, it's a virtual private network which allow you to connect the resources which is behind the firewall, right, from the private space. I will just say next. Then you have to provide a remote IP address. So you have to provide the IP address, a public IP address of your VPN device, which might be on your on premises. It support BGP and static. In case of static, like you have to provide the IP ranges, of your VPN devices. In case of BGP, it automatically discover the IP addresses basically, right? Then we have advanced options, right? So I mostly go with static only. It have a more security control, like in case of BGP, whatever IP addresses or whatever IP addresses are available in that particular VPC, it automatically connect, or whatever whatever subnets, right, available within that VPC, it will automatically connect, or whatever VPN device connecting to IP addresses, it will automatically connect in case of BGP. In case of static, you can just say like these are the IP ranges we have to connect, right? So that is a more control. You can have a more control, like you can just say static and you can mention what are the IP ranges you have to connect basically, right? So that's what we do. Then then if you see in VPN, we have other options, like whenever we create VPN, it connect two tunnels, it create two tunnels. So once VPN is created here, you have to provide all those whatever information you get it, right? Once you create a VPN, right, so it will it will give some kind of information that you can download, and you have to provide to your VPN team, your network team, so they can configure the tunnel. Like if you see, the once you create a VPN, the VPN will be always in not running state. You will see it's red basically, right? So you have to provide the configuration file which will be generated once you create a VPN to your network team. They will configure the tunnel on their end. Then it will establish the connectivity between your VPN and the VPN device which is located on premise in the corporate data center. CloudHub 2.0 also provide option to create a redundant VPN. So once you create a VPN, you can also create a redundant VPN, which will ensure that the high availability. We have a tunnel 1 and tunnel 2, but if you want more availability, you create a redundant VPN that will connect to some VPN device in your on premises, right? And then again, once you create it, you have to provide the configuration file to your networking so they can create two more tunnels. So in case of VPN 1 goes down, it will use the redundant VPN to connect your on premises resources basically, right? So this will ensure the fault tolerance and the high availability architecture. Or that's a one option. Then you can also go with the transit gateway. I can just say test tgw. You just say next, and these are the information you have to just provide, right? So it's very simple, like create the resource share and all this information you have to provide, right? All this you get from the AWS transit gateway. Like once you done it, just say, like I will just say 10, just say next, so then you have to sign in to the AWS and go to just resource share page. Like you have to just add all this information. You have a steps available. You can easily follow those steps and create a transit gateway. So there's only two options in the CloudHub 2.0. We have a transit gateway, we have a VPN, we have a AWS direct connect, and we have a VPC peering, right? But here we have two options: VPN and transit gateway, right? So VPC peering can be achieved by transit gateway. So you can achieve everything from the transit gateway, right? So that is also possible. Yeah. Any question? Let me check chat box. My skin is not visible. I think it's visible, right? Can somebody talk and just confirm?
It's visible. It's visible, Jitendra.
Okay. So Anypoint VPC, Anypoint VPC is nothing like, it's renting a separate house for your application basically. Whereas like a private space, like getting a secure apartment inside a modern smart building. So you have a big like you have a big box. Within that big box, you are just picking a subnet basically, right? Like so that is what a private space is. It's run VPC runs on the virtual machine. It's a private space container based architecture. In case of VPC, like need a separate load balancer, which is dedicated load balancer. Here we have a inbuilt Ingress controller, Ingress load balancer. Scaling means adding more full servers basically. Here scaling means like adding smaller containers. Network setup needs more manual configuration. In here, if you see, it's more automatically. Less flexible resource uses. Here more flexible and efficient resource uses, because you can assign the granular vcore sizes also. Logging and monitoring are more limited, but here you can just have, you can also get the logs, you can download the logs, right? For the load balancer and everything. It's based on the older cloud design. It's based on the modern cloud native design. Changes and deployment take relatively more time, because it spin up virtual machines, then install Java and all these things like Mule and everything. The container, it's a image, like it will just download the image and just spin up the container and deploy the application. Whereas like VPC is more an application deployed within VPC, it's more infrastructure heavy. But private space, it's more lightweight and optimized. It's a container, right? So it will be always lightweight. Okay, now I will come on the application name uniqueness in the CloudHub 2.0 basically. Right. So here application name must be unique within the same environment and the private space basically. Within the private space and within the same environment, it must be unique basically, right? So basically, for example, if I give my application name as a XYZ, right? So we can give the XYZ names in the other environment also. Same app name can be used in the different environment. Same name can be reused in the different private spaces. App name use default domain and the URLs basically, right? You cannot deploy two apps with the same name in the same environment plus the private space basically, right? So that is the things you need to keep in the mind basically. So let me see. Whenever in CloudHub you see like this is how application name is generated. My app name, whatever application, it will generate the unique ID, then 6-digit unit ID, 6-digit shard, and then like region.cloudhub.io, right? The unique ID is 6-digit append to the app to ensure the uniqueness, such as a C9 CDQR. A shard is 6-digit value associated with a private space that app is deployed, such as a Q9 OPC app. This is nothing private space ID, and 6-digit value followed by hyphen and number associated with shared space that app is deployed to, right? Such as a BSB 3v6-2. Let me show that. Okay, CloudHub 2.0. I will take this one of the API. Here you can see like it added that 6-digit 1 2 3 4 5. That is nothing unique ID and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is nothing shard basically, right? So this is what it does. So basically, like this is the application name, Ocean Car Company API dot 6-digit unique number and dot 6-digit shard basically, right? You can see it. Okay, so that is how the name is generated. Then ingress. So if you see if I deploy my application, it gave me two endpoint. This is nothing my internal endpoint here. Awesome car hyphen nothing. This is like if you see this particular name internal dot us.io. This is nothing. This is a domain or internal endpoint in the cloud hub in the private space, and this is nothing your application name, right? That is appended, right? And here you can see this is my private endpoint. In case if I don't need the private endpoint, if I want to access my application on internal endpoint also, I can just simply remove this basically, right? And I can simply remove this basically. I don't need, and I can just apply the changes. Once I apply the changes, it will remove the public endpoint. We have a last mile security also. Anybody aware what is last mile security? Anyone? Any guess? Okay, no issue. So if I not enable the last mile security, so what will happen? I will get the traffic on Ingress Controller on HTTPS, and it will redirect traffic on HTTPS to the private space, and HTTP to application. Right? So your application running on HTTP endpoint basically, right? So it's nothing a private space endpoint, and this is nothing. This is client. So the client is sending request on HTTPS. The private space endpoint is also HTTPS basically. Request came, then but your application the HTTP listener is configured on the HTTP, right? So this is what without last mile security. So basically it's no last mile security, but the port number will be 8081 only. Now in case if I last mile security is not enabled, right? And if I transferring traffic to HTTPS, this will error out. This will give 502 bad gateway. Now second scenario, I will copy this to so again HTTPS, and this is my HTTPS, and make sure the last mile security is enabled. So you have to, whenever you configure the HTTP listener, make sure like it's HTTPS and certificate a JK is configured. So it is port 8081. Now I have a last mile security enabled, and right, so I'm like here I created my application with HTTP listener, not HTTPS listener, right? And deployed, I enable the last mile security. What will happen? In this case, it will throw the error 502 bad gateway or something like that. Gateway time, not gateway time, 502 bad gateway. Okay, so that's what you can do it. Right? Any question? And like here, like you can just, it's same like properties like key value periods like CloudHub. So here you can define like if you want to enable tracing, or like it also provides some kind of Opal telemetry. You can just enable the end-to-end tracking. If you want to forward the log to any point platform, you can do that, right? If you have some application specific rules, you can define it here basically, okay? Or you can like you can assign the group basically. You can create the rules there, and you can assign the exactly groups also, like what kind of egress rule we want. There can be application specific rules, right? You can do that. Okay. Yeah, now I go to settings. I want to show you something. See, by default this particular option run in the runtime cluster mode is disabled, because I have a one replica. If I change it to 2, this will enable. So whenever your application want to share the data, and whenever it is using object store and VM queues, make sure this is enabled. If you want to use the object store v2, also make sure this is enabled. Here we have a deployment order, rolling update and recreate. So rolling update is nothing like it will ensure the high zero downtime deployment. where it will keep the new instance of application, like sorry, old instance of application till new instance is not completely deployed. In case of if new instance deployment fail, but still your request will be served by the old instance till new instance is successfully deployed, right? Then recreate, in case of recreate, it requires downtime. Your current instance will get deleted and it will deploy a new instance. In case of if it get the new instance deployment get error out, right? You don't have an option to roll back, or you don't have an option, like you have to fix that manually basically, right? You have to create a new jar, or you have to just reinitiate the deployment by fixing the issue. Till that your application will down. It's a risky option, but always choose the rolling update. Okay. And here you can see the replica count: 1 2 3 4, many replica count. You have a, like, see, small vcore size 0.05, 0.1, 0.2, 0.5, 1 1 2, like those very small vcore size is also available with the CloudHub 2.0. Here you have option, like you can select in the Java 8 and Java 17. Here you option to enable the CPU busting, CPU based uses, like in case, like you can say my minimum start with minimum replica 3, right? And like it can go up to max 3 replica, like you can define the rule basically. In case of higher traffic, you just make sure like it goes up to 3 replica basically. If my utilization is high, right, you can define the replica size. So minimum it will have a 1 replica. Depending on the number of increase in traffic, it will automatically spin up multiple replicas basically, right? So those kind of things you can easily define using this enable CPU horizontal scaling, right? This is nothing, this is concept of CPU busting basically. We're going to discuss more about this in the runtime fabric whenever we talk what is the concept of CPU busting basically, right? Yeah. So any question? Yeah guys, any question? Anybody have any question? Let me check the chat. See, there's a Suman, like there's a no such time basically. The older instance will immediately remove once it's successfully deployed and all requests has been processed by the older instance basically. It will be removed immediately as soon as all the requests has been processed, and like all the requests has been processed and like new instance is successfully up and running. Okay, so in production environment, if SSL TLS certificate expire for the external system, can you please ask the question if you want to migrate from CH1? See, for application migration, we don't have to do any changes, right? It's just we have to configure the port 8081. We have to change, if you are using 8082 or 8092, just change it to 8081, right? And the same application can be deployed on the CloudHub 1.2.0. We don't have to do any code changes basically, right? There's a no code change required, as you know, as you mentioned, right? So once you deploy the MuleSoft application, it can run on CloudHub 2.0, runtime fabric, or like only the port change will happen basically if you are using 8082 or 8092 or 91. Yeah, like just when you communicate with external entity, right now we don't have an option, right? We have to, like, we have to incorporate those certificate in the application only, right? So yeah, definitely, like that's a one pain. Like I have done some such kind of thing once basically, like to avoid any kind of downtime. What I have done, I created, like, I store my certificate in the HashiCorp vault basically. So I created one HashiCorp property providers, basically property and certificate provider, where whenever I just restart the application, it download all the certificates and everything basically to some folder within that container, and it is using those certificate basically, right? So here we don't have to do any changes. At least it will need restart. So for example, if you have to update a certificate, you can just update your new certificate into your HashiCorp vault, any other vault, not only HashiCorp. Then, like, whenever you restart the application, it will download that certificate and store within the container basically the latest certificate, right? So that is one option I can think of right now. But other than, like, you require some custom solution for that. Other than, I cannot see anything, like, where is there any way you can use the external vault basically, right, for storing the certificate. Yeah, you can use that, like, like if that Azure Vault provided. You can just, what you can do, like you can generate the base 64 string of your certificate and just store as a value basically, right? Or whenever you want it, you can have a, like you have a property provider, secure property provider, you can develop your own custom property provider, you can apply to that application, and during the restart that application will run the property loader and it will just read all the certificate from the vault every time. It doesn't have to go around, it doesn't have to do the round trip to the vault and download the certificate. During application restart, it will just bring the certificate into the container basically. But yeah, if you see, there are some GitHub repository where like some kind of custom property provider is available, Azure Vault property provider and other AWS Vault property provider. You can use that as an initial code, then later like you can just change it to any other, like you can change that code basically depending on your requirement. That is one of the thing I can think of, Kasim. Okay, so let me go back. Anything remaining for CloudHub 2? Yeah, thank you. So that is all that is all about CloudHub 2.0, guys. Okay, so like if you have any question, like anything about CloudHub 2.0, just reach me out of the link. I will try to answer your questions basically, right? So guys, like I will just enable the presenter mode for everyone. I need one picture, like so I will just stop the recording.